The greatest reason people lose respect for you is not what you said. It's not the mistake you made. It's not the message you sent. And it's not even who you are. It's something much quieter, much deeper, and much more destructive. It's how much you need them. Because the moment someone realizes that you need their attention, that you need their approval, that you need their presence to feel okay with yourself, something changes in the way they see you. They may not say anything. They may not even consciously realize it, but on an instinctive level, the respect begins to disappear, not all at once, but slowly, and this creates an invisible cycle. The less respect you feel you're receiving, the more you try to compensate. You try harder, you invest more, you explain yourself more, you become more available, more present, more willing to do anything to avoid losing that person. But the more you chase, the less valuable you become. Because when you chase, you communicate something without using words. You communicate that your peace depends on their reaction, that your happiness depends on their attention, that your value depends on their validation. And the moment your value depends on something external, you lose control over yourself. The Stoics understood this more than 2,000 years ago. They understood that true power never belongs to the one who begs for attention, but to the one who remains whole, even in its absence. They understood that respect is never earned through pursuit, but through independence. And there is a simple change, a silent change, an internal change that makes people begin to respect you automatically. Not because you asked, not because you forced it, but because something inside you changed. And when you understand this, you will never be the same again. If you want to reach a point where your emotions no longer control your decisions, where your peace no longer depends on anyone's attention, where you no longer feel the need to chase, beg, or prove your value, then this channel is for you. Because here, you will learn to develop something most people never develop. A mind that does not break in the face of rejection. A mind that does not weaken in the face of absence. A mind that remains firm, silent, and in control, regardless of what happens around you. Stoicism is not just a philosophy. It is a psychological weapon, a way to reclaim control over yourself in a world where most people are slaves to their own emotions. So if you choose to become mentally strong, if you choose to become someone who does not chase but is naturally respected, subscribe to the channel now, because every video here is a step toward a version of yourself that does not depend on anyone to feel complete. Chasing someone always sends a message, even if you never say a word about it, even if you try to hide it, even if you pretend to be in control. Your actions reveal the truth. Every time you respond instantly, not because you want to, but because you're afraid to wait. Every time you check your phone repeatedly, hoping for a message that hasn't arrived yet. Every time you reorganize your life, your time, and your emotional peace around someone else's presence, you are sending an invisible message. And that message says, I need you more than you need me. This message is not spoken, it is felt. And the moment someone feels it, something changes. Because neediness, as painful as it is to admit, destroys respect. Not because the other person is cruel, but because on a deep level, human beings respect those who are complete on their own, not those who depend on others to feel complete. When you demonstrate that your emotional stability depends on someone's presence, you give that person something extremely valuable: control over your internal state. And respect cannot exist where dependence exists. The Stoics understood this with brutal clarity. They taught that the moment you emotionally depend on something outside your control, you become vulnerable, you become unstable, you become weak, not as an insult, but as an inevitable consequence. Epictetus taught that when you base your peace on something external, another person, their approval, their presence, you are placing your happiness in the hands of something you do not control. And everything you do not control can disappear. Maybe you've lived through this. Maybe you were the one who replied in seconds, while the other person took hours. Maybe you were the one who was always available, always ready, always present, hoping it would be appreciated, but instead of increasing respect, it reduced your value in their eyes. Maybe you accepted things that, deep down, you knew you should not accept. Disrespect, indifference, distance, not because you believed you deserved it, but because you were afraid. Afraid of losing them, afraid of being alone, afraid that if you didn't try hard enough, they would leave. And that is exactly where the cycle begins, because the more you act out of fear of losing, the more you lose yourself. You lose your dignity, you lose your peace, you lose your emotional stability, and slowly you lose their respect too. Not because you are not enough, but because you forgot to act like someone who is. But Stoicism offers a way out, a silent way out, an invisible way out, a way that does not require you to control anyone, but completely changes the way people see you. Stoicism teaches a principle that is both simple and deeply liberating: emotional self-sufficiency. It means reaching a point where your peace does not depend on someone's attention, where your stability does not depend on someone's response, where your value does not depend on someone's presence. Because the Stoics understood a truth most people never realize in their entire lives. You do not control others. You do not control what they feel. You do not control what they think. You do not control whether they stay or whether they leave. And the sooner you accept this, the stronger you become. Epictetus taught that the root of human suffering is trying to control what is not under our control. You do not control whether someone responds to your message. You do not control whether someone misses you. You do not control whether someone recognizes your value, but you control something far more powerful. You control your reaction, you control your attention, you control your energy, you control your mind. And the moment you stop investing your energy trying to control another person's behavior and begin investing that energy in yourself, something begins to change. Not immediately, not dramatically, but deeply. You begin to recover something you had lost without realizing it: your presence. Your mind becomes quieter, your anxiety begins to disappear, the need begins to disappear, because need is born from internal scarcity. But when you become complete within yourself, need ceases to exist. And that is when the paradox happens, because what is scarce is valued. What is not always available becomes valuable. What does not beg for attention naturally attracts attention. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that reveals the heart of this principle. He reminded himself that the mind, when it learns to depend only on itself, becomes impenetrable. Because when you stop chasing, you stop communicating need. And when you stop communicating need, you begin communicating strength, not through words, but through your presence. You do not need to say that you are strong. People feel it. You do not need to ask for respect. It arises naturally. Because you have stopped acting like someone who fears loss and started acting like someone who knows they never lose themselves. If at some point in your life you have felt like you were trying harder than the other person, if you have felt that silent anxiety while waiting for a response, if you have realized that you were giving more attention, more energy, more of yourself than you were receiving, know that you are not alone. Most people were never taught to protect their own energy, never taught to protect their own peace, never taught that your value does not increase. When you chase, it decreases. But the simple fact that you are here, listening to this now, already means that something within you is awakening. So I want you to do something symbolic. Leave a comment with the phrase, "I choose my own value." It is not just a comment, it is a decision. A decision to stop seeking external validation, a decision to stop diminishing yourself to keep someone in your life, a decision to begin becoming someone who respects themselves first. And when you declare that, even if only in silence, something inside you begins to change. There is a deep reason why people respect those who do not chase. It is not arrogance, it is not coldness, it is not indifference. It is something far more powerful than that. It is self-sufficiency. People respect those who respect themselves because self-respect is not something you demand. It is something you demonstrate. You demonstrate it through what you tolerate. You demonstrate it through what you accept. You demonstrate it through what you allow to remain in your life. When you chase someone who is distant, you communicate that their presence is more important than your own dignity. But when you remain firm, when you remain centered, when you remain whole, even in the face of uncertainty, you communicate something completely different. You communicate that your peace is not for sale. And that changes everything. Because people value what they cannot easily control. They value what is not constantly available. They value what does not beg for attention. They value what does not depend on them to exist. Detachment creates a silent form of attraction, not because you are trying to attract, but because you have stopped trying to convince. There is a difference between presence and need. Need repels. Presence attracts. When you are present but not dependent, when you are open but not attached, when you appreciate but do not need, you become emotionally stable, and stability is rare. Most people live in a constant state of reaction, reacting to messages, reacting to rejection, reacting to absence. But the Stoic does not react impulsively. He observes, he accepts, he remains in control of himself. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his personal reflections that the one who controls their own mind becomes invincible. Invincible not because they never feel pain, but because they do not lose themselves in pain. Invincible not because they are never rejected, but because their identity does not depend on acceptance. Invincible because their stability does not depend on another person's behavior. And when someone encounters a person like this, someone who does not beg, someone who does not chase, someone who does not abandon their own dignity, respect arises naturally. It cannot be forced. It cannot be demanded, but it can always be felt, because deep down, everyone recognizes when they are in the presence of someone who belongs to themselves. The moment you stop chasing, something unexpected happens, not first in the external world, but within you, because chasing someone is not just a physical action, it is a mental state. It is the state of constantly waiting, constantly checking, constantly anticipating, waiting for a message, waiting for a sign, waiting for some confirmation that you still matter. And this silent waiting creates constant noise in your mind, noise that steals your peace, noise that fragments your attention, noise that weakens your presence. But when you stop chasing, that noise begins to disappear. You do not notice it immediately, but gradually, something inside you calms down. The urgency disappears, the restlessness disappears, the need disappears. Because your mind is no longer attached to something outside your control. And for the first time in a long time, you return to yourself. Your attention returns, your energy returns, your presence returns, and with that, your peace returns. The anxiety that once dominated your thoughts begins to lose its strength, because anxiety is born from uncertainty and from the attempt to control what cannot be controlled. But when you accept, when you let go, when you stop chasing, you free yourself. Epictetus taught that freedom begins the moment you stop depending on what you do not control. And this freedom is not only emotional, it is visible. Your posture changes. The way you speak changes. The way you exist changes. You do not react with the same urgency. You do not seek with the same desperation. You do not fear with the same intensity, because you are no longer trying to avoid loss. You understand something most people never understand. You never lose what is truly yours. And this understanding creates strength, a silent strength, a stable strength, a strength that does not need to be announced. Your mind becomes stronger because it is no longer being pulled in every direction. You are no longer controlled by external expectations. You are no longer controlled by external validation. You are no longer controlled by the fear of absence. You are in control of yourself, and that makes you become something rare, because most people never reach that point. Most people keep chasing, keep begging, keep trying to convince others to see their value, but the one who does not chase does not need to convince anyone. Their presence speaks for itself. Their calm speaks for itself. Their self-sufficiency speaks for itself. And what is rare is respected. If you have made it this far, it is because a part of you already understands that there is a different way to live. A way where you are not controlled by rejection. Where you are not controlled by absence. Where you are not controlled by the need to be chosen. But this mental strength does not arise by accident. It is built little by little, thought by thought, decision by decision. And the truth is that most people will never do this work. Most will continue reacting emotionally, continue seeking validation, continue chasing those who were never truly present. But you are not most people. You are here because you chose something different. You chose to understand your own mind. You chose to develop control over yourself. You chose to become someone who does not beg for respect, but naturally inspires it. So, if you want to develop this Stoic mindset, subscribe to the channel now, because every video you watch, every idea you absorb, every principle you apply, strengthens something inside you that no one can take away. A mind that does not depend, a mind that does not chase. A mind that remains firm, regardless of who stays or who leaves. Subscribe now and begin building the version of yourself that cannot be shaken. But understanding this principle is not enough, because in moments of loneliness, in moments of silence, in moments when you feel the urge to check your phone, to send another message, to seek some sign, knowledge disappears and habit takes control. That is why you need more than understanding. You need practice. You need a real change in the way you think, in the way you react, and most importantly, in the way you see yourself. And everything begins with the first step. Step 1. Stop seeking external validation. External validation is one of the most silent dependencies that exist. It manifests in almost invisible ways, in the expectation of a response, in the need to be noticed, in the need to be chosen. But the moment you need someone else to validate your value, you lose something essential, your emotional autonomy. Epictetus taught that when you seek outside what must come from within, you become a slave to the opinions of others. Because your peace no longer belongs to you, it belongs to circumstances. True change begins when you consciously decide that your value will no longer be determined by anyone's attention. You do not need a message to feel complete. You do not need approval to feel enough. You do not need to be chosen to have value. Your value does not increase when someone stays, and it does not decrease when someone leaves. It remains. And when you stop seeking validation, you begin to recover your freedom. Step 2. Focus on your own life. The energy you invest in chasing someone is energy you are stealing from yourself. Energy that could be used to build your mind, to strengthen your body, to expand your life. But when your attention is fixed on someone, your own life goes on pause. You become a spectator of your own existence, waiting, watching, reacting. The Stoic does the opposite. He returns his attention to what he controls, his habits, his discipline, his purpose. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, concentrate your mind on what is within your control. When you begin building your own life, something powerful happens. You stop needing someone to fill a void, because there is no void anymore. There is direction, there is growth, there is strength, and people notice that. Step 3. Accept losing anyone. This is the hardest step, but also the most liberating. The fear of loss is what creates need, and need is what destroys your stability. When you live in fear of losing someone, you begin to act cautiously. You begin to censor yourself. You begin to diminish yourself. You begin to tolerate things you should not tolerate. But the moment you deeply accept that anyone can leave, fear loses its power. This does not mean you do not care. It means you do not depend. You appreciate presence, but you do not fear absence. You value connection, but you do not sacrifice yourself to maintain it, because you understand that losing another person will never be as destructive as losing yourself. Step 4. Build internal strength. In the end, everything returns to this. Internal strength, a strength that does not depend on external circumstances, a strength that does not depend on external attention, a strength that does not depend on external validation. This strength is built in silence, in the moments when you choose not to react impulsively, in the moments when you choose not to chase, in the moments when you choose to remain firm, even when it is difficult. Every time you resist the impulse to seek validation, your mind becomes stronger. Every time you choose your own peace, your identity becomes stronger. Every time you choose yourself, you become more stable. And over time, something changes permanently. You are no longer trying to keep someone in your life. You are building a life that naturally attracts those who belong in it, and those who do not belong simply stop mattering. There is a silent paradox that most people never realize. While you are chasing, you are moving toward others. But without realizing it, you are moving away from yourself. You are abandoning your peace to maintain attention. You are abandoning your stability to maintain presence. You are abandoning your value to avoid loss. And ironically, the more you try to keep someone in your life, the more that person feels that you can be replaced. Not because you have no value, but because you are acting like someone who believes they do not. But the moment you stop chasing, something changes. The silence you leave behind begins to speak. Your absence begins to be felt, because before your presence was constant, predictable, guaranteed. You were always there, always available, always accessible, always ready. But now there is space. And it is in that space that people begin to notice something they never saw before. They notice your absence. And for the first time, they feel what it is like not to have immediate access to your energy. They realize that you are no longer orbiting around them, that you are no longer waiting, that you are no longer available in the same way. And this creates something rare: mystery, value, respect. Because respect is never born from need. It is born from strength. It is born from stability. It is born from the ability to remain whole, even alone. Marcus Aurelius wrote that true dignity comes from depending only on what is within you, not what is outside you. And that is exactly what happens when you stop chasing. You return to your center, you return to your control, you return to yourself. And paradoxically, that is when people begin to see you differently, not because you asked, not because you tried to convince them, but because you changed. You are no longer trying to be chosen. You became someone who chooses. You are no longer trying to maintain respect. You became someone who naturally inspires it. Because in the end, the Stoic does not chase. He does not beg. He does not run after anyone. He does not abandon his own dignity to keep someone in his life. The Stoic becomes complete. He becomes stable. He becomes whole. And by doing that, he becomes someone worth chasing.